Welcome to yet another Executive Strategy Day. A very special one. I'm joined here by lots of wonderful people from the games industry and beyond. Simon Naus, co-founder back in the day of Monogon. Rudolf Wolterbeek Muller, back in the day co-founder of Davilex, infamous Davilex. Rick van Ginkel, back in the day co-founder of Self-Made Miracle. And Bojan Endrovski, from Game Oven back in the day. Now this is a special one. We've done a couple of these now before. Every time we want to do the same, roughly the same thing. We want to paint pictures of the struggles of a startup in the game industry, obviously. Having to figure out in these first couple of years what works and what doesn't work in terms of both business and in terms of, well, the organization that you're running that's supposed to deliver that business. And in this case, it's pretty interesting because these four gentlemen have ended up deciding at some point to either stop temporarily or cease permanently their business or change it into something else completely. So the goal behind all of this, as it has always been, is to just share knowledge about how to, let's call it stay fit as an organization, as a startup. Really being able to identify a need for change and the drivers behind that change, both in terms of the business and the organization, and in this case, a very interesting change indeed. All right, so I think we're all set, right? I think, we should start. And I sent you the questions up front, so there's no surprises, but I'm gonna start with you, Simon. Maybe that's a surprise. But I'd like to first ask you just to explain Monogon, back in the day. What was it about? How would you describe that core business when it was still active?
Well, me and three friends during our studies decided to start a business on the side because we were either bored by our studies or just were interested in making something that's not related to university. And that was back in the end of 2012. Then later on, two of those people left, and it was me and my partner, Maxime Schoenmaker, and we've been working on a game called Interloper, which is an RTS game that we wanted to sell through Steam and other platforms. And we worked on that for 3.5 years next to our studies, and we released it finally in May 2015.
Any particular reason why the first group of a couple of fellow students decided to do something else?
We didn't really agree on things, and there was some conflict, and the problem was that we were a limited liability firm, so you have the thing with shares and then people dropping out, keeping shares, things like that. It was a bit of a conflict legally.
So you released the game in the end. Happy with the game?
Yes, as a game in itself I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Very much so. It did well. We got an IGF nomination for it actually. Right. So.
But soon after, or did you continue on the next title?
Awards don't necessarily translate to sales, sadly. So we decided that we were making money, but it wasn't enough to sustain the business. And the problem was that Maxime and I were kind of annoyed by having the company, by legal conflicts, and we're both reasonably good developers, so we could make a lot of money somewhere else. Yeah. Or we could just kind of keep it on with our own thing, which didn't really seem appealing at the time.
Let's move to Rudolf Wolterbeek Muller of Davilex.
Sure.
Or should I just say Rudolf Muller?
Yeah, what you like.
Whatever you like. Davilex is a well-known name, I would say. Back in the day when it was still active, until whatever happened. How would you describe the core business of Davilex in your own words?
Well, it had a lot of business, so I'm not sure it had a core. But what I was there for was games. Yeah. I started there in '95. I had my own company before that, which I started at university. Mm-hmm. It was called Red Cat Software. We were basically building one game, which was a platformer game featuring Red Cat. Through a connection, we managed to sell that game to the Rabobank, and that connection turned out to be David Brons, which was the founder of Davilex. And he was like, well, I want to get into the games business and I want to do that with you. So in September '95, I went to Davilex on my own, got one developer that nobody wanted. And I think in 2 or 3 years, we were with 40 or 60 people developing games. We had several games that were doing really, really well.
Well, were they of a similar genre? Would you say that?
Totally not.
No.
So we had one competition manager game, which you could also play 3D soccer game, but it was also a little bit of management. A2 Racer, which was racing, and Red Cat, which we struggled with to do. We didn't know what to do with it. We did several iterations of it until we found, well, okay, we're gonna do edutainment. And I was a little bit frustrated by it because I wanted to do games. So I made a deal that, okay, we're gonna do a really good game, and then we add some education stuff in it, so you have a good excuse. And that turned out to be actually a success. Okay. So we sold really a lot of Red Cat games. I think it's in the millions of CD-ROMs. And A2 Racer was a game that took off like crazy. Competition manager, not so much. So we ended that at some point. We did a lot of soccer adventures and whatnot. And we kept on growing and growing and growing until at some point I think we outgrew ourselves, and we sort of outgrazed the green area, and there was nothing left. And then when you're growing really, really fast and you're hiring people, and it's really hard to turn around. When we caught up with reality, so to speak, we were in a bind and we had to fire a lot of people. Who were then hired by the company next door. What was it called? PlayLogic. Years later, I thought we could have sold the studio to them instead of just firing.
If they wanted them.
So it was a stupid decision to actually fire those people instead of trying to sell what you have.
What a perfect note to move on to the next person. No, that's very clear. Actually. Let's move on quickly to Rick. Self-made miracle. So, explain to us, what was the core business at the time?
Well, it's sort of comparable to what Simon just told us about how we started. Started off with 5 people in total, also during our studies, basically just doing whatever we could. So we had some web developers, we had some application developers. I was actually the only guy who was like full on wanting to do video games. First 2 years we kind of operated from home, and it was more of like a side business than an actual business. We barely made any money, but it was fun to engage in. And then after those years we got an office in the Dutch Game Garden, and that's also around the time when I really started pushing for video games because it's what I wanted to do. We'd also lost some people at that point, not really like legal conflicts, but more like change of what people wanted to do. I was pushing this game idea. 2 of the other guys were like, well, okay, then I'm out. I was like, oh, all right, okay, we'll carry on.
Pushing these games, Rick.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't being an asshole about it, but I was just making clear that I thought we needed more of a vision rather than just doing all of these random things. I didn't see sort of like a feasible business plan in that. So I started prototyping some games, and one of those turned into what became Panarium, which is basically the only entertainment game that our studio released. We worked together with Team 17, who's a UK publisher of Worms fame, and we brought that game to PlayStation, Xbox, and mobile, and PC. The game initially didn't sell really well. It was all right. It didn't give us the budget to immediately go like, okay, we're going to do another 2-3 year development cycle on our next title or something like that. So we kind of had to change, and we shifted more into work for hire mode. Yeah, and I think that's kind of the gist of it. Actually, if you look back on it now, the numbers aren't even that bad. No. Like the long tail of the game was pretty all right, but it wasn't enough to immediately keep us going as an entertainment game studio at the time.
And you were here, and well, probably it's still the old location.
Yeah, old one, but also here.
Also here.
For I think about a year or something. Yeah.
Let's move on to Bojan, and let's talk about Game Oven. What was back in the day the core business of Game Oven?
Well, I'm not sure if we had like strongly defined core business, but we knew what kind of games we want to make. And the focus was on games that will make you sweat. That was kind of the direction that we went into. For the most part, we tried to challenge what a mobile game would be. So it was, at that time, mobile was a market that was growing really, really fast, and we were really early on the iPad. That was as well where the first game came on. So that Fingal was the first out. So we made Game On basically so that we can sell Fingal. So we had a product before we had a company, but the first game shaped what the company would operate like. So basically, to boil down, the game model would be we were selling premium mobile games, and we tried to have a steady cadence of 6 to 9 months per game. So in the about 4 years that we were active, roughly every 9 months we had a new game. Some of them did better than others, and the ones that did well, both critically and in sales, were Fingal and Bounder.
Pretty clear. Different kinds of answers. You already mentioned a little bit how you organize yourselves to get these games out there, but could you shed some more light on it? So, the organizational design.
So we started off with two founders, myself and Adrian de Jong. And in the first 2 years or so, we operated by the two of us, so the two co-founders. And somewhere after the second title, we hired Elina, who is here in the studio. So the idea with hiring Elina was to have, as Adrian would put it, to have our own Rami. to have someone that will push the.
Minus the beard, right? Yeah.
So that was the idea. Behind it, and from that point we operated. So basically, Elina took, I think when she came on board, took more of a role of a producer rather than a salesperson. And the way that we operated was 3 full-time employees, myself as a programmer, Adrian as a designer, and Elina as a producer. And we kind of externalized everything else. So we would have, on average, about 4 to 5 freelancers working on a project and 1 to 2 interns working on the project. Freelancers would have a strong focus on something that they need to do now, so like sound or music or art or something like that. And the interns would usually stay through the whole project. So we stayed small. Yeah. Throughout the entire time, we stayed really, really small because the games that we were making small, that kept the cost relatively small. We also rented an office at the Dutch Game Garden on the previous location. Yeah. So that was the organizational structure. Yeah. Small, quick, so that we can do quick projects, and trying to externalize all of those things that we did not need all the time. Yeah. And certain things like the art or the music would vary greatly from game to game. So some games were 2D, some games were 3D. Mm-hmm. So it did not really make sense to have a dedicated 2D artist or a dedicated 3D artist, right, or a dedicated musician, someone that will create music, because for Fingal we had a strong 70s vibe to it. But then for Bounden we had, it was a collaboration with the Dutch Opera and Ballet, so it needed completely different kind of art and music. So this let us navigate that field. Yeah.
What about those, when you were externalizing certain development, were there key partners there, or
we had
different?
a pool of freelancers that we would first call. So being in the Dutch Game Garden allowed us to leverage that relatively easy. So if you would need music, usually you don't have to go more than a couple of floors up and down or something like that. So a lot of those were there. We had good enough contacts through events. So we basically had a small pool that we would pick from. Yeah. And we also had an artist in Macedonia, where I'm from. So we leveraged that as a connection. So we were working with artists, sometimes also programmers from Macedonia. And Rumena was one artist that was basically on every project since the second one. So I would guess if she would have lived in the Netherlands, we would have employed her in the company, but she was in Macedonia, and that also was working well enough for us. So online work was successful.
Pretty clear picture you're painting. Wonderful setup. Was it very deliberate from the get-go? This is how we're going to model this company, or did this emerge and sort of come up?
Well, I think that with the sales that we had, we were forced, and with the kind of games, so a lot of those things came from the kind of games they were making. I think that on the very first time that we were showing Fingal, That was not the first project that we worked on together, myself and Adrian. But the previous project was more like a student project, especially for Adrian. And I think that when we showed it, JP was the one that gave us like a small advice. Oh, 2 people. That's nice, lean and mean. I like that, and I think that we took that as an advice. I think that was at the very first Indigo in front of on the Hako parking place.
Okay. So it's all JP's fault then.
Yeah.
Okay, no, that's good. It's good to know.
That's one way to
Yeah.
frame it.
No, but you really took that as an idea, inspirational. Let's keep it, lean and mean. How would you further elaborate a little bit on, the organizational design of Self-Made Miracle?
Yeah, so we started out with a whole bunch of people, and then over the course of about 2 years, where it was more of a hobby thing, cut it down to 3/4. Which is basically me, where I took on the role of game designer and also kind of like the business guy of the studio. And then one of my friends is a really good developer. He was just our head of development and usually also the only developer. And another friend of mine who was more heavy on the art side was kind of like the art director.
Yeah.
And then the sort of like 0.5 guy that came in every now and then was another friend of mine who has an accountancy background. Oh. And he kind of came in to help out with more of sort of the organizational stuff and the administration and things like that. Other than that, I mean, we still lacked a lot of disciplines to kind of like get Binarium done in that time. So kind of did the same thing as Bojan did. I went to the Utrecht School of Arts. I met a lot of people there with a lot of talent, and I kind of just poked them all. I was like, hey, do you want to work for absolutely no money at all, but a share of the profits that the game will make? Because at that time, we legitimately had no money at all. We were just, like, anything we made basically just went to rent, and that was it. That's also one of the reasons why we looked for a publisher for Binarium, because we wanted a development budget to work on the game. Might not be so common anymore these days for indies to get that, but back then it was still sort of doable.
Definite key partner then.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I mean, they provided us, amongst other things, with a development budget that allowed us to feed ourselves and pay our rent, and even hire a few people against a sort of modest salary, and then we gave them royalty percentages on top of that. But they were also a key partner in the sense that they provided the PR and marketing, and also a big part of production. We would Skype basically every week with a producer in their office, and we'd go over a milestone schedule and see if we were on track or not, and what we would cut and things like that. Because we didn't really have that in-house. I was sort of the less organized person in the team, so to speak. So usually I was seen as like the production guy, but certainly back then I wasn't. I was just, everybody else was worse, basically. that was the thing, so it fell onto me. So I was really happy that we got to work with this publisher who had people who were actually good at these things. Yeah. And help us out with
really
that.
Help you out with that on even a weekly basis, I understand. That's really impressive. Good. Rudolf, let's move on to you. Now, let's stick to the last years maybe of your involvement in Davilex. How would you... after the growth, how would you describe that organizational design of Davilex at the time? Because it's a big company, right? So you needed to divide things probably.
Yeah, we started out like them. Yeah. But I had help because there was already an organization, because the other business units were already functioning. Yeah. So I could learn from them. Right. And I also had a boss who told me, "You're ready for this now." So where I didn't have to find out everything myself, which is a help. But also for me it was a big conflict, because I wanted to do everything myself. So we had big fights about actually how to grow, and I wanted to keep the culture separate from the rest of Davilex.
Oh, I see.
Because I didn't want any business influence. People who make courseware, or accountancy software, or all that stuff. I didn't want them near us. No. So initially, I moved to a different building. Okay. And that was a great time, because we could do everything ourselves, etc. One thing was completely different from what you guys experienced. We couldn't go external because there was nobody. No. It was literally a desert in terms of people who you could hire. Everyone who could draw a cube in 3D Studio, you were hired because you could draw a cube, right? Also, in terms of programming, there were kids around hiding in attics, they were all making Quake engines. Some of them I would be able to lure into our office, but a lot not, because they had an inherent distrust of big companies. But at some point we were 20 and that was a big company, so they were afraid and they would be swallowed up and whatever. So there was a big distrust that we had to overcome. We had huge issues growing and getting people, educating them. We did all kinds of crazy stuff. We went to the HKU here, not here, but in Hilversum back then. We offered them a free 3D graphical teacher. All refused because of internal politics. And I personally think they were afraid there would be somebody who was better than them at what they did. That would contrast badly for them. That's the kind of issues we were running into and trying to create a company that can grow. Going external, if you wanted, you could go to England. You would pay megabucks for virtually the same what you could create here, but it would take longer. So we didn't. But at some point we went to Germany, where we created a copy of our studio, but smaller. And in the later days, we also went to Warsaw, where I encountered a few guys that I thought were talented. Yeah. But that also took a lot of effort to educate, to keep going, especially in Germany. I remember long drives there, trying to get these guys to be motivated, and then driving back and then having the feeling that I achieved nothing. So it was a big struggle. Yeah.
Just so that I don't lose you there, Rudolf.
Sure.
When you're talking about we and the 20 people, it was basically the games unit within Davilex that you're talking about, right?
At some point we were 120, I think. So all games.
All games, yeah.
We had a team doing racing.
Yeah.
Just racing, because at some point you specialize. Within the team you get specialized units, people doing the engine, people doing graphics. And if you talk graphics, some people would be specialized in doing tracks, because that's it's an art in itself. Yeah. People doing cars, movies that you had to render at that point. So that you created all kinds of specialized units, people who were senior, who were directing all that.
Yeah, team leaders basically.
Yeah. And then on top of that, a project manager, and on top of that, a development manager, and you all grow this during this hectic time.
Yeah, a couple of years, you said, right?
Well, we started in '95, so I think we were at 120s around 2002.
Oh,
so
okay.
7 years.
7 years.
To
my God.
But that was basically, it was all a struggle. Yeah. Because getting good people was very hard. For me, it was a struggle because I had to learn to let things go. Which was for me very hard to do, because I was so involved with my products, etc., that I would find it hard to accept that somebody else was interfering, in my opinion, in their opinion, of course, doing their job. So that was hard, but we managed, and we grew and kept growing and kept growing. We're finally weaned into the big Davilex building.
Yeah. When was that? 2002?
Really? There. Yeah. Davilex did everything itself. So we built our own building in Houten, which is still there. It's a huge building. We invented everything ourselves. We wrote our own software, our own engines, etc. It was crazy. I don't think you would ever do that now, because you have so much stuff that you can hire or buy or...
Just reuse, build upon.
Exactly.
Yeah. And lots more expertise around, I guess.
True, absolutely.
Oh yeah, and the internet.
Also a thingy, yeah.
More or less, right? 2002, right?
In 2000, we were going to go to the stock exchange. We were seriously moving that direction. And we had New Economy come in, and they would tell us that we were worth 1 billion gulden back then. We were all thinking, okay,
let's do it then.
Yeah, let's
Everyone
do
else
it.
is doing it, so let's do it. But you didn't do it.
We never got around to it. We didn't have our structure right, and it was very difficult. And then the internet bubble thing happened, and the stock market crashed for tax. Yeah. So it wasn't a good period, and the moment was gone.
Yeah. Okay. Well, pretty clear picture of how, over a period of 7 years, I still can't believe it. You grew so fast.
Absolutely.
Dividing the company up, if I'm summarizing it correctly, according to technical expertises mostly.
Yeah.
And even dabbling in Germany and Poland.
Absolutely. Yeah. And creating a management structure. It was very important. Designers having to learn design, which was also something that wasn't taught. They were trying to figure out how that works, and we were trying to figure out why it wouldn't work. And lots of discussions, but in the end, everything we did is now basically what we did. We did a weekly scrum. Yeah.
Well, you didn't call it scrum.
You didn't call it scrum. No. We called it a weekly build. And then the product owner would come and look at it and say, okay, well, I'm missing this, or this is not good enough, etc. Right. And then they would transfer that to the next weekly scrum. Yeah. Which created a lot of interaction, which was good for the product. I think in the end, we made really good products. In the beginning, not so much.
Thank you, Rudolf. How about you and Monogon?
Yes.
In your own words again, what was the organizational design?
I'm going to skip to the part where there's only 2 founders left to keep it more clear. But me and the other co-founder were both developers, and we basically created tech the first year and a half, just gray boxed all the arts and all the assets, and we kind of grew organically from there. We hired a sound designer, a musician, a artist, and we did some outsourcing for making videos, and it kind of grew when we needed the people for it. Right. Yeah. At some point, we also hired Elina at the end to kind of do the PR around the launch, because we would be busy with other stuff. So yeah, that's
basically how it went. Any, so when you were hiring people, freelancers, right? Yeah, any key partners, people there, or did they differ a lot, or was it so short term it was?
No, we had, the musician was kind of working with us from the start. She was a girlfriend of one of the founders. And she did it as a hobby project first, and later on she joined. And our artist was an intern at first, and then later on he did some additional work. But we kind of designed around it, because we knew we couldn't afford to hire a lot of animators, for instance. All the animations in our game are programmatically made. They're all physics-based or something similar. So we kind of worked with the limitations in that sense.
Surely we can define this as a pivotal moment of change. Monogon, at some point, how would you describe it in your own words? What happened? Did you stop? Was it a temporary thing?
Yeah, well, the build-up kind of came from when we decided to start Steam was a really big thing, and being on Steam was a really big thing. So we kind of pushed towards that as our main focus, releasing on Steam as one of the titles that does that. Then in the end, we released on Steam together with 26 other games on the same day. Right. So it kind of had lost its edge. We did get a carousel, which helped, and we had a lot of publications, but the kind of environment shifted in a way. And we put all our eggs in this one basket, which didn't really pay off in the end. So we were kind of quick on pulling the plug, actually, because we were kind of happy that we were finally done with finishing this product that we were working on and off on for 3.5 years. And then the climax doesn't come. Yeah. So we decided to just call it a day, do something else.
So how did that happen? Was it really just the same week literally sitting together saying, okay guys, we're done?
I think we set this goal for ourselves, like we gave it 3 months and then we had a certain target, I think. And if we didn't meet that, then we would just call it a day. Because I was still in student finances at the time. I was supposed to graduate 2 months after the game released. But my partner, he graduated the year before, so he was also low on income, so we had to make decisions.
Yeah, giving it 3 months, that's a pretty clear answer. And then, since it was the two of you, it was pretty easy to wrap up, I guess, right?
Well, wrapping up a limited liability firm is kind of annoying, I've learned. But yeah, it was easy. Like, we didn't have any property that we had to divide or anything, so it was just a hollow shell basically that we could just liquidate.
Okay. But I do want to ask, are there any other key drivers there that really decided the two of you to call it a day? Other than that, was it really, do you feel, looking back at it all, that there was more going on?
Well, I think we mostly just grew tired of it, and the issues we had with people leaving and having high expectations, putting a lot of effort in development and programming that nobody's gonna see because people used Unity at the time, and not really a recognition for craftsmanship in that regard, which we found to be annoying, because you could get that in another industry. Like, I don't know, it's mostly that we kind of grew tired of the industry as well itself. I think you had all these social politics going on around the time, which seemed to be very important to everyone, and I don't know, we just felt that maybe we could have a bigger societal impact somewhere else, maybe do something that feels like it matters more.
Now, and I just want to, for my own understanding of those 3 months that you gave, during those 3 months, were you sort of trying your best in different kinds of ways to crank up those sales? What were those 3 months like?
We'd spend mostly doing PR and customer service as well. People having problems with software, helping them out, them being really happy, leaving good reviews, which helped a lot. And we really pushed on that at that point, but it's kind of too late to do it at that point, I feel like.
How do you look back at those 3 months? Do you feel like that was stressful? We gave it our all, or do you look like, we knew at the beginning?
Mostly just depressing, I think. It wasn't really, we didn't mind working hard, and it helped to some extent, but it's just that it didn't help enough for us to do something similar again.
Hey, but you're here still, and you've moved on, and we'll get back to that in a moment. So Rudolf, time for you to bite the bullet. For you, what happened exactly right at the end? 2002, I think you mentioned, was a pivotal year for you.
Yeah, I think things were going really well then still. We moved to PlayStation, which was a huge hit. But at some point, I think we overdid it. I would say that around 2004, we had to let go a lot of people. Because if you plan for growth and you hire for growth, and then it's really hard to turn around when the revenue starts dropping. So that, and then it's going really, really fast. So.
Especially because you mentioned you were 100 people? No, what did you say?
Yeah. So we had to close, at some point we had to close Germany, and we had to let go of a lot of people, which is kind of sad because you spend so much effort on getting them and so much emotion in educating them, and so that's really, really bitter. And we had a kind of cycle, a retail cycle, where we had to release more and more products to get the same kind of revenue. And it's kind of hard getting out more products when you're actually firing people. So I think the quality of products wasn't as good as we would hope them to be. We started getting products from outside. At some point in 2005, I was depressed enough to say, well, at the end of this year, I'm gone. So I gave them a year, because a lot of things were going through me, etc., to take over from me, etc. And I left 1st of January,
2006.
2006. I started a new company doing online games.
Yeah, but during that year, what happened? Could you shed some more light on that year? It sounds like an important year. Was it?
Well, actually, we were down to I think maybe 20 or 30 people.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've ever been in a dying company. It has a certain atmosphere that's not really exciting.
No.
You can taste it, and every day it's depressing.
Yeah.
And every day you know that at the end of the year you're gonna produce more products or you're gonna publish more products, but they're not gonna sell exactly the same or a little bit less. Yeah. You have to work harder for less, and that's not a good idea in my opinion. And I was kind of excited to do online games. I was already pushing for it in 2002, 2003 to do online games inside Davilex, but there was never room enough for it. We had to work hard to get the products out.
Yeah.
So we then have extra money to spend on doing something completely different, which is, I think, needed if you do online games, because it's such a different way of thinking and developing. Yeah. Now I ended up doing it in a separate company outside of Davilex.
Yeah. But so 1st of January 2006, you step out, or was it really?
No,
you step out, so that's the end of Davilex.
I stepped out. It existed, at least games existed for a little while longer. Okay. But I really closed the door. Yeah. And I was really not looking back. Oh. And I was like, okay, this book is finished for me. Interestingly, I got a call the 2nd of January if I wanted to sell all my stock for €1. Okay. And I refused. There was too much emotion for me, and I was like, okay, well, I just heard the story about the Russian debt and the obligations that existed before the revolution, and they just turned into because they acknowledged them again, and they were worth money again. And I say, I'm willing to wait 100 years for this stock to become worth something, because
and then I'll sell. So yeah, you're still waiting for that.
No, I sold. They made me an offer later.
Okay.
For money.
Sold. Okay. Yeah. So for a short while, Davilex games continued.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, but without you.
Without me, and they were struggling.
Yeah.
And basically, it died because of the whole cycle.
Mm-hmm. Well, it wasn't worth it. They didn't turn it around. I guess that's So yeah, there's again already some insights into key drivers of your, well, in this case, your decision to go out and sell your shares.
Yeah.
How would you describe those drivers in your own words? Really personal ones, right? You were sort of personally frustrated. That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I was. I thought I could do a better job.
Yeah.
I thought it wasn't worth sticking to a cycle that you know is not going to work.
Yeah.
So at some point, it's also a matter of a pain threshold.
Yeah.
If it hurts enough, then you are willing to do it.
Yeah.
And the problem was that we were all still making good money. So we were earning our salaries, etc. And the salary was good. So it's hard to sort of say goodbye to that at some point. But at some point I thought, well, we can go on for this for a few more years. It's gonna die anyway.
Yeah.
So I gotta get out. You have to draw your own conclusion that if you really want to do that, then you have to make a move.
Yeah.
And to be fair to Davilex, because they were always fair to me, I said it on the January 1st of 2005. At the end of this year, I'm gone. So take everything from me. Use me the year, or whatever. Yeah. I'm not leaving tomorrow.
Fair. Yeah, let's move back to Rick.
Yeah.
What about Self-Made Miracle? What happened there? I think it's pretty... Well, there's some stories around, I think.
There's some stories around, yeah. So What first off was kind of weird for us was that we finished Panarium for basically all platforms except for mobile. That was going to come later, but we got it for consoles and PC and Linux and whatever. But Team 17 had a release schedule that wouldn't push the game out for I think about 2 months or something like that, because they were like, hey, that's a good opportunity for the market, blah blah blah. I don't know, they did their magic, and that was supposed to be the date that the game was going to come out. But our production schedule was way before that, so the game was kind of just put on the shelf, and we weren't receiving income anymore because the development budget was done, because we were done developing, but the game wasn't out yet, so there wasn't any sales either. So that kind of already forced us to change our business model a little bit. So that's when we started getting into work for hire. At this time, there's only 2 of us left. So the one guy already left at this point. So it was me and my technical partner, and he was really good, still is, really good programmer. So in a way, it kind of became this firm where I was sort of his agent. And I was basically going around to other game studios saying like, hey, you need a guy to do your console porting because we now have experience with that, or you need to do back-end stuff because we now have experience with that, and things like that. And I was kind of just like selling him, and then he would work really hard and get all the stuff done, and I'd get him new work. Though financially this actually did way better for us than the entertainment game thing that we did.
Ouch.
It was just not what we set out to do, you know? Like, I mean, yeah, I wanted to design games. I mean, I enjoy doing the biz dev kind of thing, and I've moved into that more now as well. So, I mean, I'm interested in that area. But it was a bit weird. I wasn't representing a company. I was basically just representing one guy.
Yeah. How long a period was this?
I think this went on for about at least a year, maybe a little bit over. Maybe about a year and a month or 4 or 5 or something like that. Yeah. So somewhere in this period, the game actually did get released. And as I mentioned, it didn't sell very great in the first couple months. Then it kind of like settled into us like, all right, this mode, which we thought was like our temporary survival mode until the launch of the game, or maybe a couple months after or something, is probably going to be, is our main mode now, you know? Like, we're probably not going to go back to making an entertainment game, even though we wanted. So we kind of had this idea that, okay, we're going to do this thing where basically we're going to make money by doing outsource work for other companies. Then we're going to bank up some cash. And once we reached, I think we said like 20K or something like that, we're going to do a new demo for a new game, new publisher, blah, blah, new cycle. Maybe this one does actually make us millionaires or whatever.
Well, well enough
probably
so that you
not
don't
millionaires,
have to...
but exactly. Maybe this will actually secure a future for the company, right?
Because that was the business model you were trying to pursue.
Yeah, exactly. But this whole mode that we were working on, this business model, it just really dragged on us personally, to a point where we did start working on a new prototype for a new game, and I still think it's a great game, but it just wasn't with the same kind of like passion. It's a bit like what Rudolf said as well. You feel it in the air when you're in a dying company, and that was really going on as well. There were days where we were just playing video games the whole day, just doing nothing, just slacking off. And we knew that we shouldn't be doing it, but we were both like, if you don't mention it, I will mention it. Whatever. Let's just, let's just carry on.
The weird situation of having a 2-person company.
Yeah, kind of.
One tells the other, I won't mention it.
I mean, it's not like we literally said it, but it was sort of like implied in that moment. And I kind of think, especially looking back on it, that's where it really went downhill. So at some point, my partner came up to me and he was just like, all right, dude, like, we need to talk. It was like a relationship, you know, you're running a company with 2 people. If one person says we need to talk, you know what's up. So I knew like this is not going to be good. He's not going to be saying like, I really enjoy doing this.
You braced yourself.
And so first off, he actually asked me like, are you still enjoying this? Are you still having fun? Don't you want to like design games and work with multiple people and manage a team and all these things that you enjoy doing? And I was like, no, I'm not really enjoying this. So are you enjoying this? And he was also like, no, I'm not really enjoying this. I make it sound a bit easier now than it actually was in reality.
Long story short.
Because of course it was a really difficult decision. But for me, it was kind of like, I was pretty burned out at this time too, because during the development of Panarium, I worked, I think for about almost a year straight, I worked 6 days a week, and then from about 10 in the morning till 8 in the evening or 9 or something like that, which was okay. I didn't really felt back then that was really dragging me down, but I think sort of like after the release and, you know, your sort of like grand adventure that you set on is kind of come to a halt, then I started to feel the burden that I've sort of been carrying along all the time. So I asked myself, if we were going to do this new game, if we're gonna go on, that means that my partner needs to do a job that he doesn't really like doing for a long time to earn us money for the studio. Then we take all of that money, we give it to me, so to speak, as the game director for the new game. A burned out guy without any creative ideas at this point.
No, because you were busy running around getting all this.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah,
and I just wasn't in a good mental state
I can
at that time
totally imagine that,
as well. So the risk was kind of like, okay, we banked up a bunch of money. Either we spend it all now on the new game, which we kind of know is gonna fail. Like, we didn't feel good about, not even like commercially, but we're probably not even gonna get to release. We were thinking like, or we quit, we split the money, and we do whatever we want to do. Yeah. And that's the decision we went by. Yeah. And I think for him, it might also play a bit into what Simon was saying, because he is a more technical guy as well. What he kind of said is like, okay, so far I'm just a graduate. I've been working at this company for 4 or 5 years now, or something like that. I've always been kind of like the senior dude. I don't have anybody to learn from or whatever, even though he's really good and really talented at what he did. But he was kind of like, maybe if I go somewhere else, there's actually somebody I can look up to and who can elevate me to a higher level instead of me having to figure out everything by myself. And of course, if you're a good programmer, you get a good salary. So that was also kind of interesting for him.
Part of the equation.
Yeah. So I think those are kind of like the two reasons why we quit.
And then it was a quick quit. Two of you.
Yeah. I mean,
get it done.
We already planned a trip to the GDC in San Francisco for that year. We were supposed to pitch our new game there, but we didn't have a new game, so we went anyway, and we just made it a vacation, which was kind of nice. It was kind of like our parting ways. We just spent the time cycling around San Francisco and doing touristy stuff, and we visit the show floor like a couple hours, and that's it.
So it was a breakup holiday.
Yeah, sort of. The breakup holiday.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's kind of what it was. But it was good though. It was, and we're still great friends and all that. So
good. So it sounds to me like there's two key drivers there at least. One being just a financial one, combined actually with some unexpected planning issues with the publisher, and the other really personal ones where you realize that, hey, actually this business model doesn't fit with me or with us anymore, or not at all. Yeah. Is that a correct
I
summary?
Think that's fair.
Yeah.
That's
Bojan. Well, Game Oven, talk about stories that became well known. I think many people around in the Dutch game industry were pretty saddened at the time to hear Game Oven sort of quit. But in your own words, what happened?
Adrian, was the partner in the company, he walked into the door in the studio one day and said, "You know what? I don't want to do this anymore."
Yeah. Out of the blue.
Sounds like Adrian.
No, absolutely not out of the blue.
No.
So we had a lot of we had friction within the studio. It's two founders. We brought Eline kind of on board to kind of manage us, but we never
straighten
really
you out.
Basically someone to boss us around, but we never really gave her the tools to do that, and it came from different reasons. One was our livelihood was on the line, and you bring in someone who doesn't have the same motivation, right? So it doesn't have anything with professionality. It doesn't have anything with that. It has to do with your mistrust, because your livelihood is on the line and someone else's might not be. So you might be viewing things differently. You're really unwilling to let go of the decisions and hand them over to someone else. So the dynamics didn't change with Eline coming on board. Some dynamics, a lot of the tasks did. So it was a relaxing moment that there were a bunch of things that we could let someone else do. But a lot of the friction that we had before that stayed within the studio after that. I think a lot boils down to different goals and different directions where we wanted, different visions that we wanted to achieve with us being in the studio. Different age as well. So at that point I was with kids, so having a small studio that has unstable income and having kids, it's not a good mix. So what I wanted to do is to have a bit more long-term stability, and I wanted to achieve that by bringing external partners, let's say. So talking with Microsoft, talking with Nintendo, talking with Sony, and a lot of those talks were positive, but at the same time they really interrupted Adrian's creative vision of where we should be going. So it meant that we are less independent. It meant that someone else from top might be directing where we are heading, what this next project should be about. It also interrupted the cycle. So we managed to get a few of those projects in. It's not that we didn't manage. So we did manage to get some of those projects in. While I meant it as, let's bring stability, and Adrian could work on his next creative project, something that is creatively more satisfying, that ended up turning to basically swallow up the entire time. So then he's not only expected to come up with the next crazy idea, he was also expected to produce this boring one, and to do that a couple of times in the year. So I think that was not in line with how he wanted things to move forward. So I think a lot of that friction came from there, and the last project was definitely a catalyst for that, because it was a semi-external project. So, and it didn't have a due process. Most of the games we would prototype for really long time, then find something really small, some core there that works really well, and then build an entire experience around it.
Right.
And this one was the other way around. We pitched an idea that we had absolutely no way of knowing how it will turn at the end. We pitched, I took it on me to pitch a game that Adrian had already done in the previous setup. So he was creatively done with it, and now I'm resurrecting this old project because we need money. And I'm not only saying, this is what we'll do, but you need to make this better and more fun and bigger than what was 5 or 6 years ago in a market that has dramatically changed. So that was definitely a catalyst for breaking the studio. And at some point, I guess it reached breaking point for him. I was thinking about it as well, but I wasn't sure and how to proceed forward. But he had already made up his mind, so he announced that he'll be leaving the studio. Now that opened a discussion: do I stay in the studio and keep running the studio by myself? But the studio had already had a name that was basically revolving around these crazy designs, and
a key person then
so
goes out.
that's your key person. So
would that work?
It was very obvious that it wouldn't.
No.
So at that point it was okay. So if
then we call it quits.
Yeah, we call it quits.
Yeah. And was that a lengthy process?
Well, we had a baby as well. We had assets that we needed to divide.
Yeah.
And basically we just did a fair 50-50 division across all assets, whether they are intellectual property or physical assets, or everything that we had was split 50-50. And we didn't have any external, there was no external publisher that we need to inform about it. It was not a lengthy process. No, there were other really stakeholders. The only one affected was emotionally. It was of course the two of us, and then Eline that put a lot of time and effort into the company, and that the company was closing down. So she needed to find her own path from there on, and we get to keep our assets, right? And she didn't get to keep her.
No.
So she didn't have any assets to. So for us, there is, well, you know what? At least you will have the long tail of these games. You will have whatever is right now on the bank account. And for Eline, that was like, okay, that's a full stop. So that's quite harsh for her as well.
Yeah, tough stuff. Yeah. Oh, lovely, depressing stories, right? Well, it's time we lighten the mood a bit, surely, because let's end this interview, this panel, with a positive note on what happened since and what cool things are you all doing now. So let's go back again from Bojan to the other side. Bojan, what cool things are you doing now?
I don't know how cool teaching is.
It's awesome.
I'm teaching at the Breda University of Applied Sciences, and I've been doing that for about 3 years. Somewhere in between, I worked on a bunch of other games, so I love working on games.
Yeah.
So I teach at the game program at the university. I've been working on at least a couple of games since. I also freelanced a bit after that, and freelance is really the wrong word. I was basically an external for Endemic Creations, which is a UK studio. They do strategy games, in particular. They do Plague Inc., which is a fun game on mobile. And after that, it went on Steam, it went to Xbox, and there were a lot of versions, and someone needed to bring all of those versions together. And that was basically my task. So Game Oven opened a lot of doors.
Yeah.
In surprisingly a lot of doors. So the moment that Game Oven closed during GDC, where we already knew that we were closing, I basically managed to speak to a bunch of companies that would like to hire me, and my options were Uber, Google, Ubisoft. So it wasn't, and all of that came from Game Oven.
Yeah.
Well, it's Uber in Amsterdam, and Google, a game studio that was acquired by Google, so it wasn't like Mountain View, but still, those were the companies, and Ubisoft Blue Byte, which is in Düsseldorf, and a bunch of others as well. So all of those came from Game Oven. So that was I was surprised that was the impact of it. I decided to work with Endemic Creations because I could jump straight into lead developer. So basically, I was given the keys of the entire project. So how do you want to run this in the future? And I did some months, I think 6-7 months of that. And then the studio wanted me to move to London. Yeah. And that for me with 2 kids did not seem like a good proposition. I really, really love the Netherlands. Yeah. The fact that you can put 1 kid in the front and 1 kid in the back, and then go to kindergarten school, and then get to work with your bike. It's amazing, and do all of that in the fresh air. I think it's hard to find something like that. So I decided to stay in the Netherlands and work I don't know, the whole experience with Game On. Do you know what are the 2 best days of the life of a boat owner? The day he buys it and the day he sells it. So in a way, creating Game On was one of the best things that happened, and as well, closing it was definitely a liberating experience. It was one of the best things. Yeah. I could move on to do other kind of things. I could actually spend a lot more time with the kids, which is something that I was missing. Yeah. So yeah, it's been, and now we are friends with Adrian. Yeah. So not sharing a bank account with someone eases up some of the tension. So now we are actually friends, and we are back to talking about things that are interesting. Yeah. It's been actually a lovely ride. I've learned a lot from it, and it has opened a whole lot of doors. Yeah.
Thanks, Bojan. Rick, what about you? What amazing things are you up to?
Kind of go back to when we first quit. I spent the first couple months doing nothing at all. It's like 3 or 4 months I just took it off, did nothing but playing video games and seeing people that I hadn't seen in way too long, and that was great. That also took its toll at some point. At some point, I was just like, dude, I gotta do something. You know, like this is not me. I was turning into a person I shouldn't become, so to speak. So I actually went to some networking events and stuff and started talking, saying like, hey, I want to maybe freelance for somebody, or if you have a job or whatever. And I got into touch with a couple guys who were running a company, and they were basically looking for a business developer. So I said, okay, I have some experience in this, and even though I always saw myself more as a game designer, also in that last sort of phase where I wasn't really designing a lot, but more being the business guy anyway, I felt like I think this is a more marketable skill, so to speak, in the industry. I mean, there's a whole lot of kids who want to be game designers out there, and they're also pretty good at it. but there's not a lot of people that want to do biz dev and kind of have some experience in that field as well. So I thought like, okay, I'll just focus on this. So I freelanced for I think about 7-8 months or something like that, and that went pretty well. And now I actually ended up about a year ago forming a new studio with the guys I used to freelance for. So I'm back to doing work for hire, but now I'm basically just focusing on the business. So I do some design on the side every now and then, but it feels a lot better to just have like one clear focus instead of having responsibility both on the creative end as well as on the business end. I just delegate all of the creative stuff to the rest of the team, and I do the business.
Well, you do speak their language, and you know.
Exactly.
Asset, right?
That's why they tolerate me. That's no, but what I also think is what Bojan said is that in a sense it was also really freeing to me as well, because I've been working with these guys in Self-Made Miracle for so long. They were also my friends, some of them going back to when we were 4 or 5 years old or something like that. So it was always this unit. And I always had the idea that whatever successes we had was kind of like the success of the unit, and I couldn't really measure how much of that was like my influence or things or something like that. So when I actually quit and started doing new things and started seeing that we got successful with those kind of things as well, or at least moderately successful to the standards of a startup, so to speak, I felt like, hey, maybe I am actually a factor in this, you know? Like maybe it's not just like sort of the foggy team that did everything. So yeah, that was kind of liberating. That I started seeing myself more as sort of a professional in the industry.
Okay. Yeah. Wonderful. Sounds good. Yeah. Sounds like you found your way and found a bit of focus. That's pretty important, right? Yeah. Yeah. Good. Wonderful. Rudolf, tell us about the wonderful online gaming future you stepped in.
Okay. So in 2006, I rehired the guy I first hired at Davilex. I took him with me from okay. He still works for me. Okay. We basically rented an office in the Media Park here, and we started building an online soccer game called World of Soccer. Through some connections I had with distribution, I made a wonderful deal to sell paper cards, which you had to use in the game, which worked really well in retail. And they wanted to get a piece of the action of online because they were left out. And we got a great deal with Jetix, which then still existed, to do media attention. And at the end of the year we released and we had a success, and I was back in business. And we grew really fast. We did a deal in France, we did a deal in Germany.
History repeating.
And I was back where I kind of started, only with a lot fewer people. Because I had determined I'm never gonna hire that many people again. Okay.
So one key lesson there.
And one key lesson there, but Germany and France didn't do well. So that ended that rather quickly, sadly enough. We went to a web version stage, and at the end it's just sort of died down. And the kicker for me was that at some point we banned a guy in Germany because he was abusive to children. And he ended up calling me on my private number and threatening me to kill me. And I just had kids, and I was very aggressive, and I was like, I'm done, and this is it, and it's over. And I'm never doing games again. No. And it was a really weird period also, because we were at the end of the life cycle of that game. And you have a hardcore community of players, and they were all cheating, and we were finding ways to sort of stop the cheating, but you're punishing your customers, so that's really perverse. And I was already like, okay, this is not for me. I started doing games because I wanted to make people happy, and they were all very cynical about everything we did to change and make it more fun to play the game instead of cheating. And that was sort of the end of me. And then this guy calling me because KPN sort of published my home number.
Oh, how wonderful!
Yeah, and that sort of was the final straw.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, I'm not. I'm done.
Yeah.
And so I did some soul searching. I got lured into solving problems for a web company. I actually bought some shares in it and did some CTO work, which is kind of, in a healing sense, was very good for me because I sort of started to like doing stuff on the development side again and talking to guys about new stuff instead of doing games. But at some point I got frustrated with the way the company was run, thought it needed something else, and I kind of left. Started doing app development work for hire, also with the guy that I hired first at Davilex. And that sort of took off. We did an app called the Dementia app, which sort of got me in touch with, okay, wait a minute, we can do stuff that really helps people. And that is kind of satisfying, I think. And at the end of that cycle, the guy that started the Dementia app, I asked him, well, let's do a company together, doing more of this stuff, but then in a more structural way, and that makes sense, because I had also a little bit of a vision about how to do that in a better way. And that took off. We started here in the game garden, and on top of that,
was, quite recent, right?
Quite recent, end of last year.
End of last year.
And on top of that, we got asked to do a cashless payment app for festivals called Festicoin, which we're in the middle of doing a new version. And I started doing a game again. Because why not? Because and a hobby project of mine, which is I've got two kids now, and they're in their puberty. And if you ever go with kids in their puberty to museums, it's a really frustrating experience. And if you ever looked at their multimedia guide, that sucks. And I was like, okay, I can do this better. And so that's a project that we're releasing at the end of next year.
Okay, wonderful.
So and also without any museum, because I cannot get them convinced that the way I see it is the way to do it. No. So I'm going to do that myself.
Oh, exciting! Yeah.
So that's it. That's what I'm doing right now.
Wonderful. Yeah. Thank you, Rudolf. Sounds awesome. A really entrepreneurial man, aren't you?
Well, at this point, I really think if this, after all this, I want to work for somebody, for just to get the experience. And in my opinion, it should be relaxed. Instead of having to worry about every detail, etc. And it would be nice to have everything arranged for you. And just go in there, do one thing really well, and then go home and close the door. And
well, hold on to that dream, Rudolf. Wonderful. Thank you. Let's finally move on to you, Simon. What are you up to nowadays?
Right, well, I started by taking a half a year off, kind of similar to what Rick did. I graduated and had a social life. Then I decided that I would like to have a job as a software developer outside of games, because I felt like it could teach me more. And that's also when I learned that all the skills that you have as a software developer within games are very limited to games, and not to a company that makes web services in Java. So I was kind of underqualified for a lot of things, but I found a firm called Viction. They're a Utrecht firm. They're about 10 years old, I think. Small firm, but with big contracts. And the boss liked my entrepreneurship, so to say. So he wanted to give me the benefit of the doubt, and I've been working there ever since.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah, I can imagine that it does help to future employers, new partners. You can show experience with entrepreneurship, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Any particular remark you got there? It's like, if you're an entrepreneur, then you've got the right mindset or attitude, or what is it, do you think?
Yeah, I guess it's kind of that, kind of doing a bit more. Kind of also seeing opportunities that an employee wouldn't see, kind of understanding the implications of certain systems. I go to clients as well and things like that, so you kind of see a bigger image than specifically.
I'm just here to code. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, bigger picture. Well, wonderful. Yeah, and that's based here in Utrecht, right?
Yes, and on the Nieuwe Gracht.
On the Nieuwe Gracht. Oh, nice. Yeah. Great, wonderful. And I guess it all goes to show that sometimes it's good, it's important, rewarding to just stop something and do something else. Because in the end, in hindsight, I think you all look back at what you first described as a depressing period as something that liberated you in the end, right? I think that's a common sentiment, at least. So let's all thank these wonderful gentlemen for their stories. Thanks again to these 4 wonderful gentlemen, and thank you for watching wherever you are, and see you next time.